Good evening. It is primary night in Colorado, and this is John Hickenlooper's night in the Democratic Party. A win for a centrist in a party moving left in a hurry. A 20-point win over Andrew Romanoff, the progressive former House Speaker, who claimed surging momentum in the final weeks of the campaign as the Hickenlooper camp had a number of stumbles and issues, many of them self-inflicted, but it appears that those who comment about politics, political reporters and so forth, people like me, made a whole lot more of it than voters did. Democratic and unaffiliated voters in that Democratic primary overwhelmingly handing the nomination to John Hickenlooper to take on Republican Senator Cory Gardner in November. Gardner predicted to be one of the most vulnerable incumbent senators anywhere in America. Polling shows Hickenlooper or a generic Democrat having a significant advantage over Gardner in November. But Republicans only have so many seats that they can defend to hold on to control of the Senate, so you better believe that they are going to get foursquare behind Cory Gardner, who has decided that his best bet at re-election is to get foursquare behind President Trump. They have vocally endorsed one another, wholeheartedly stood with one another, so you can bet that former Governor John Hickenlooper, the Democrat, will attempt to make the November general election a referendum on President Trump, who will be atop the ticket. We are expecting to hear from John Hickenlooper any moment now, a virtual acceptance speech tonight. It's an unusual primary night, a time of pandemics, no parties with people eating the free food and, the cash bar and so on and so forth. Everything is virtual today, both for the Romanoff camp and for the Hickenlooper campaign. 2 of their 3 debates, televised debates, were also virtual affairs, including the one on 9 News. So that simply is how politics and campaigning are done these days. But John Hickenlooper rolls into the general election against Senator Cory Gardner with tremendous momentum. There was all kinds of crowing from Republicans in the last couple of weeks that Hick was in deep trouble, that he was stumbling across the finish line. It was no doubt that national Democrats came in to prop him up with a lot of support, ad spending, endorsements, so on and so forth down the home stretch. They came to his defense in a way that suggested that he was a man in need of a political life preserver. But in fact, it appears he didn't need the help. A 20-point win in a Democratic primary is no joke. That was a very crowded Democratic field as a ton of people got in to run against Cory Gardner, sensing that he was very vulnerable and not knowing if John Hickenlooper was going to come home from a failed presidential bid and want to run for the Senate, a job that he said that he did not want and would not be very good at. Americans decided the same of him in the presidential primary, so Hickenlooper returned to Colorado to settle for the Senate. And in doing so, absolutely trounced the progressive candidate who was in the race from the start, saying that this was the job that he wanted. Not certain whether Democratic primary voters were unsure whether Andrew Romanoff could win a big race in our state, having lost a high-profile House race against Mike Kaufman in Aurora, and previous to that, a failed challenge in a Democratic primary against appointed Senator Michael Bennet. But for whatever reason, Colorado's Democrats and the unaffiliated voters able to participate in a Senate primary in our state for the first time overwhelmingly chose John Hickenlooper to be the Democratic standard bearer against Republican Senator Cory Gardner. These are men who know each other, who have worked together on a number of issues while Hickenlooper was governor and Gardner was in the Senate. Gardner now standing for re-election for the first time after he defeated a Democratic incumbent, Mark Udall, back in 2014. But the issue for Gardner to overcome, again, and we're waiting to hear from John Hickenlooper any moment now from his virtual campaign celebration tonight. The issue for Gardner is going to be President Trump's fairly catastrophic unpopularity in Colorado. Obviously, President Trump, extremely popular with the Republican base, of which there are dwindling numbers in our state, as unaffiliated is now the largest party registration by number in Colorado, Democrats second, Republicans third, and Democrats holding the largest level of control over Colorado politics since the 1930s. Gardner and I believe a state education regent are the only statewide elected Republicans at this point. As we stand by and wait for John Hickenlooper, and every one of you tires of the droning sound of my voice, I want to bring in the droning sound of politics reporter Marshall Zellinger's voice to at least break things up a little bit. Marshall, we thought that this primary race could be interesting enough, at least down the home stretch, that it was worth commissioning a 9 News poll along with our partners at Colorado Politics to see whether Romanoff was closing the gap. Yeah, that was a great idea. What'd that poll tell us?
Well, I'll tell you in fairness, in the past I've said I don't believe in polls. Then we do a poll. It was 58-28. So people said it was a 30-point swing, but there was still, what's the math? 15% or so that still had not decided at the time. So if they all go to the Romanoff camp, our poll looks pretty close at that point. I think 14%. My math might be off. If you can tell the one color difference on the map behind me, Andrew Romanoff, if there can be one glimmer of light in his day here, and I know he's had a tough week with the loss of his father and now the loss of this race. Sawash County went Andrew Romanoff, so he did not get shut out in county by county by county. He at least right now has Sawash County on his side for what it's worth. But this green map is all John Hickenlooper. That's what I'm highlighting here. But besides John Hickenlooper winning and the margin that he won by, that's the interesting part. The story of Colorado right now is that congressional District 3 race between incumbent Republican Representative Scott Tipton, who appears to be now out of a job perhaps because he's being beat by Lauren Boebert. I'm going to turn here. I keep refreshing my screen because we're supposed to get John Hickenlooper shortly on a Facebook Live. And I think that's about to happen, Kyle. So we are going to go to the announcement and the congratulations now of John Hickenlooper.
Fundamental decency of a nation that looks out for its people, that treats everyone with respect, and lives up to the ideals at the very foundation of who we are as a country. Let me be clear. Change is coming, and you and I are going to bring it together. I just spoke to Andrew Romanoff. I know this has been a hard week for Andrew, and I admire his strength and the strength of his beliefs. At this difficult time for him, he offered me his full support, which I am honored to accept. I told him what I want to say to you. I need him and every one of his supporters to bring the same passion and energy they brought to Andrew's campaign to the fight ahead. It's going to take all of us together to beat Cory Gardner and bring about the change this country so desperately needs. I've never lost an election in this state, and I don't intend to lose this one. There's far too much at stake. But this fight isn't going to be easy. Donald Trump, the Republicans, and their dark money groups are going to keep throwing everything they've got. Everything they've got, they're going to throw at us because they can't defend Cory Gardner's record. They can't defend Cory Gardner trying to gut people's health care. They can't defend Cory Gardner supporting tax breaks for the wealthiest individuals and corporations. And they can't defend Gardner's silence as Donald Trump ignored a pandemic, fanned the flames of racism, and divided America that we love. Now, we know Cory Gardner will keep saying one thing here in Colorado and doing another in Washington. He'll pretend he's independent when he's in Colorado, but we know what Donald Trump told us himself. Cory Gardner is with him 100% of the time. Well, at least Donald Trump told the truth about that. I know you won't be fooled by Gardner's deception. I know you'll see right through him, and I know you'll hold him accountable in November. I want to thank everyone who cast a vote, who made a phone call, endorsed this campaign, who phoned a friend, sent a text, or just cheered us on. Thank you. Thank you to the tireless campaign staff who worked countless hours to spread our message of bringing people together to deliver change. And thanks most of all to my wife Robin and my son Teddy for putting up with me campaigning in quarantine with them. They make every minute of my life better than the one before. Now we're living in awfully tough times right now, and it's clear we have our work cut out for us. At every tough moment, Colorado has always risen to the challenge. When I was governor, we faced natural disasters, mass shootings, Great Recession, but we recovered and brought our economy from 40th in job creation to the #1 in the country. We always got back on our feet and came back stronger than ever. And when you and I beat Cory Gardner, flip the Senate, and change Washington, America will roar back stronger than ever as well. If you're fed up with what's happening in Washington, join us. Go to hickenlooper.com and sign up. We need you with us. Thank you. And let's.
Well, sometimes that happens. This is on the internet. So there you have John Hickenlooper's victory speech tonight in the Democratic Senate primary, in which he very early on stressed that he has never lost an election in this state. That's a good asterisk, because otherwise somebody could challenge him on his dismal performance in the presidential primary and caucus process. But it's correct. Hickenlooper has never lost an election in this state for Denver mayor or for Colorado governor. Goes without saying, he's never faced an opponent like Cory Gardner. Yes, Cory Gardner has an uphill climb this year because of the state of Republican politics in Colorado, because of President Trump's unpopularity. But Cory Gardner has a skill level just as a politician, you take all the situational stuff aside, like John Hickenlooper has not seen before. He trounced a lot of competition in mayoral races, and had a tight re-election race for governor against somebody who previously got blown out in a race for governor. So while he ran through this primary against Andrew Romanoff, he could be in the toughest campaign of his career against Cory Gardner, just in terms of somebody's pure abilities to debate, campaign, make politics, so on and so forth. Or maybe the Hickenlooper political, whatever you want to call it, machine or persona or this or that or whatever else, is so well established and so popular in Colorado that Gardner will just go into the wood chipper like so many of Hickenlooper's opponents in the past. Is Marshall Zellinger and his Zellustrator still available to join the conversation?
I know I am. I don't know if we can see the Zellustrator or not, but I'll try my best.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness. I'm curious, Marshall, what you made of the message that we heard there from John Hickenlooper, clearly taking the fight to Cory Gardner, as he's going to need to do in the general election. One thing that I've listened for, maybe other people don't care about it, maybe voters don't care about it, but just because of the fact that Hickenlooper spent so much time talking about how he's not really interested in this job, I keep listening to see if he sounds like a guy who's interested in the job, because when you heard him as mayor and when you heard him as governor, much like our current governor, Jared Polis, he has just kind of like this geeky intellectual excitement about it. You can just tell he loved the policy of it. He loved making those decisions as an executive. And the question is, does John Hickenlooper really want to go and be one of 100 senators, one without a ton of real sway or voice or this or that, anything else? Did that sound to you like a guy who's getting more excited about the job?
The part that stood out to me was I've never lost an election. Does he sound excited for this job now? He's always talked about being able to bring the best people together and build teams as the executive. That doesn't matter on the Senate floor. It could matter when you're in your offices and trying to strategize what bills you want to introduce, what speeches you want to make, what support you can have, but ultimately, as we've said, you have to hit a yes or no button on the Senate floor, and then that you're no longer the executive, you're legislative branch at that point, and you have to make a decision. You're no longer building a team. I think he's probably come around to it. I don't know that I heard that much from that speech. The reason that part stuck out to me, that he's never lost an election, I don't believe Senator Cory Gardner has either. Also, as someone who does the truth test, I just want to point out he's also not had the most difficult races to run. You could argue that when he became mayor the first time, that was as difficult as it's been. But his two gubernatorial elections, I mean, we could say you haven't had a race to lose necessarily in those two races, but we can get into that later. The numbers, I just want to update. It's not going to change the Hickenlooper Romanoff race because we've heard the concession, we've heard the victory. 1.26 million people, ballots have been counted so far. We still know there's at least 110,000 to go so far from what we saw at 4 p.m. And the numbers are Hickenlooper at 60%, Romanoff at 40%. It's going to stay about that 20% change right now. Kyle, I think, again, the story is as you mentioned, now that we're at Gardner versus Hickenlooper, what else is in the grab bag for the Republicans and Cory Gardner that we haven't seen yet, that they're just waiting to have a negative political ad about over the next 3 months? The big story, Congressional District 3, Lauren Boebert appearing to unseat the incumbent Scott Tipton. And there are some other things at a state House and state Senate level that we can get into over the week that's really interesting to me. But from a national perspective, Hickenlooper, will he ride the momentum? And what's going on the western slope in southern Colorado?
Yeah, I'm calling it right now. The thing that you're going to hear people talk about nationally tomorrow, and if you're a politically minded person in Colorado, that you might hear somebody ask, oh, what's the deal going on with this, is Republican Congressman Scott Tipton appearing to lose his primary to restaurant owner Lauren Boebert, best known for owning Shooters, where the wait staff open carries guns. A woman who got into the race not really having any disagreements with Scott Tipton, just saying she wanted to go to Washington in order to fight with AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Boebert, interestingly, Tipton has been in Congress for 10 years now. He got in line with President Trump, strongly embraced him over the last 4 years. Boebert came in and said, I will be Trumpier than you. And it appears that Republican voters in the 3rd District overwhelmingly like that message. Our producer's going to get mad because they told me to wrap, but I have one more thing that's way too boring to put on 9 News at 9 or 10, but that's what the internet is for. So I've been doing some math. And the fascinating thing about Congressional District 3, Western Slope, Southern Colorado, down to Pueblo, some of the resort towns, this is a district that over the last 25 years has had both a very popular Republican congressman in Scott McInnes, who left to run for governor, didn't get that, and then a very popular Democrat, John Salazar, and then a very popular Republican again, Scott Tipton. Average margin of victory in the general election races for congressmen in the 3rd District of Colorado is 18.5 points. The only 2 races in the last 10 races, the last 20 years there, in which the margin was within 5 points, are the 2 times that the district flipped from Republican to Democrat and then from Democrat to Republican. Once they get somebody there, they tend to like them. And they tend to like them a lot. And it's fascinating. That district has not had a sitting member of Congress lose a party primary since the mid-1960s. They get people, they tend to keep them, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican. And now we have a situation shaping up where the Democratic nominee is going to be Dianne Mitz-Bush, who ran and lost to Scott Tipton by 7-8 points 2 years ago, facing off against Lauren Boebert, who has never run a race of that magnitude in her life, hadn't run a race of this magnitude until now, but it just totally scrambles a situation there. And the other thing that I would point out to you, Marshall, because again, this is way too boring for TV, but we're not on TV, we're on the
I'm
internet.
enjoying it.
Well, thank you. You and me are the only ones. In 2016, people talk about how that's a Republican-leaning district, but doesn't, always vote Republican. They loved Trump. Colorado District 3 loved Trump in 2016. It was Trump by 12 points. You're right. A lot of Democrats and moderates in Pueblo voted Trump. Okay, consider that. Trump won that district by 12. Romney won it in 2016 by 6. McCain only won it by 3. Then you go back, Bush won it by 11, Bush won it by 15. But you had some moderate Republicans who eked out victories there, 3-6 points in that district. But man, they love Trump. And you have a sitting congressman endorsed heartily by Trump, knocked off by a woman with no real political experience who comes in and says, I love Trump more.
But Donald Trump would probably tweet about her tomorrow because it's the kind of stuff that he enjoys, what she stands for, which is no different than Tipton.
Sure. Obviously President Trump is going to wholeheartedly embrace Lauren Boebert if she is in fact the Republican nominee in the U.S. House. And it's interesting because I wouldn't say that, I was going to say that Colorado has not had her type of ideological firebrand in Congress since Tom Tancredo, although he had a different approach to politics than she did. But honestly, Marshall, if you look at it, Ken Buck, congressman and the current state party chair for Republicans, says a whole lot of Lauren Boebert-y things these days. So there is that strain of, while Democrats amass more and more power in Colorado, Republicans have moved farther and farther to the right, and the places where they can win, they're electing people who are very conservative and outside what was the norms of the party pre-Trump.
I know producer Jen is going to get really mad. I just want to show this. This goes with what you were talking about, Kyle. The blue area on the far left side of the screen, the western slope, that's the Republican side of the really Republican side of Congressional District 3. You get more Democratic as you get into the Pueblo and southern Colorado area, and Lauren Boebert really has the far right of the district in her camp right now.
All right. If we don't cut this off now, we're both going to be unemployed by morning. Scott Tipton's not unemployed tomorrow morning. He's just a lame duck. All right. Thank you all for being with us here while we talk about nerd stuff on this primary night. Hope that you will join us for 9 News at 9 o'clock, which is on the television. So none of the nerd stuff, just the basic stuff on 9 News at 9 and then 9 News at 10 on Channel 9. Our online coverage continues across the networks of 9 News. This is Primary Night in Colorado.